I still remember that Monday morning like it was yesterday. The kind of morning where nothing seems particularly special, and yet, it turns out to be the day everything changes. I was scrolling through my phone, half awake, my apartment filled with the muted hum of the city outside. I was supposed to meet Sarah, my closest friend, later that afternoon. We'd been friends for years, and honestly, I trusted her with things I didn't even tell my own family. She had this way of knowing me better than I knew myself, and part of me both feared and craved that insight. Sarah had messaged me earlier, "Wear something comfortable today. Yoga leggings would be perfect." At first, I laughed. Yoga leggings? Me. That's not really my style. I'm more jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers kind of guy. But there was something in her tone, light, teasing, but also undeniably firm, that made me hesitate. She wasn't the type to give instructions unless she had a purpose. By noon, I was standing in front of my closet, pulling out my usual choices, my hands shaking slightly. I tried to convince myself it was silly, that I wasn't going to change anything just because of a pair of leggings. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that this was about more than just clothes. I ignored it, though, and ended up slipping into a pair of dark grey leggings Sarah had insisted I try. They were soft. Surprisingly soft, and they fit in a way that made me aware of every line, every curve I usually ignored. I felt exposed and oddly vulnerable, but also different. When I arrived at Sarah's apartment, she opened the door with that wide, knowing smile, like she'd been waiting for me all along. "Finally. You look amazing," she said, and I could feel my face heat up. Her words weren't just casual praise, they carried this weight, this curiosity, like she was seeing me in a way I hadn't seen myself. She handed me a hoodie, oversized and soft, and said, "Put this on over them. You'll feel more comfortable." I obeyed without thinking. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of laughter, conversation, and small exercises she insisted we try. "Yoga is all about balance, awareness, and being present," she explained. I nodded, trying not to look at how tight the leggings hugged my legs, how every movement seemed more conscious than usual. By the time we finished, I realized I hadn't felt this aware of myself in years. Not just my body, but my posture, my expression, even the way I breathed. There was a strange clarity to it, like stepping into a different version of myself. Later, Sarah handed me a mirror. "Look," she said softly. "Really look." I did, and I didn't recognize what I saw at first. Not completely. The face staring back at me was still mine, but my features seemed softer somehow, more open. My legs looked different. Graceful. Something inside me stirred, a mix of fear, excitement, and shame. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. She was watching me, smiling, patient, giving me permission without saying it. I left her apartment that evening feeling a strange tension I couldn't describe. I wasn't sure if it was embarrassment or anticipation, or maybe a mixture of both. My mind replayed the way the leggings felt, the way the hoodie draped over me, the way Sarah had looked at me with those quiet, knowing eyes. I felt exposed but also free. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about how different it had felt to be seen, how strange and thrilling it was to step into something I had never considered before. I kept touching the fabric of the leggings, feeling it against my skin, and wondering if the changes I felt inside could ever truly be reversed. By the time morning came, I realized something terrifying and exciting at the same time. I didn't want to go back. At work the next day, I tried to act normal, but everything felt off. My clothes felt restrictive, my movements awkward, and the memory of the leggings lingered, like a whisper. I couldn't focus, couldn't concentrate on emails or meetings. My mind kept drifting back to Sarah, to that afternoon, to the strange thrill of being noticed, of being something more delicate, more visible. By the time I got home that evening, I knew I had to see her again. I needed answers. Or maybe I just needed to feel that sensation one more time. And when she opened the door, her expression was unreadable. She didn't comment on what I was wearing. She just gestured for me to follow her into the living room. And that's when I realized this was only the beginning. Sarah had laid out several outfits on the couch. Not just leggings, but tops, sweaters, shoes, even scarves. She looked at me and said something that made my heart stop. "If you want to explore who you really are, we can start today." I froze, my chest tight, my mind spinning. Who I really was. I had always thought I knew myself. Jeans, sneakers, the usual life. But standing there, facing her, I realized I had no idea. Something inside me stirred, something curious, something yearning, and maybe something terrified. And then she smiled. That calm, patient smile that made me trust her even when my own mind screamed against it. "You don't have to decide yet. But if you want, just try one." My hands shook as I reached for the soft fabric. I slipped into the leggings she picked, a vibrant shade of purple this time. The moment they touched my skin, my body seemed to hum, alert in ways I didn't expect. I caught my reflection in the mirror again, and this time, I didn't flinch. I just looked. Really looked. That evening, as I left her apartment, something had shifted. I walked differently, held myself differently, felt differently. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Something inside me was awake. Something new. And I knew, deep down, there was no turning back. The next few days were a whirlwind, though I tried to pretend everything was normal. I went to work in my usual clothes, acted like nothing had changed, but inside, I was unraveling in ways I couldn't control. Every time I caught a reflection of myself, office glass, car window, even my phone screen, I froze. The leggings, Sarah's words, the way she had looked at me, they were lodged in my mind like a persistent echo. I felt restless, anxious, and yet, alive in a way I hadn't been for years. I started finding excuses to see her. I'd text her casually, "Hey, want to hang out?" Or "Got time for a quick coffee?" And every time, she responded with that same calm certainty, "Of course. Come over." By the third day, I found myself standing at her door before even realizing I had planned it. This time, she didn't ask me to try anything immediately. Instead, we sat on the couch, sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation meandered, but beneath it, there was tension, a silent electricity. Then she leaned back, looked at me directly, and said softly, "I know this feels strange. But trust me, there's a reason I asked you to wear the leggings. You're hiding parts of yourself, even from yourself." I wanted to protest, to laugh it off, to say she was imagining things. But I couldn't. She was right. I had been hiding, my curiosity, my longing, the small, quiet part of me that had always wondered what it would feel like to move through the world differently. I had always brushed it away, called it silly, but sitting there, hearing her voice, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Her eyes softened. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But if you want to explore, I'll guide you. Step by step." That was all it took. My resolve crumbled. I nodded before I even realized what I was agreeing to. The transformation began that evening. She handed me a new set of clothes, a fitted, soft top, a slightly longer cardigan, and leggings that clung in all the right ways without being too tight. As I dressed, I felt a strange mixture of shame and exhilaration, as though I was stepping into someone else's skin, yet also discovering a part of my own I had buried. When I stood up in front of the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back. Not entirely. My features were the same, but somehow softer, more open, more fluid. My posture shifted naturally, my shoulders dropped, and my hips moved with an unfamiliar rhythm. Sarah watched silently, smiling faintly. "Take a walk around the apartment," she said. "Feel yourself in the clothes, in the space. Don't think about anything else." I did, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence. Every step, every movement felt alive. I was aware of my body in ways I hadn't been since. I couldn't even remember. After a while, she said, "You're ready for the next part, if you want." My stomach twisted, a mix of fear and anticipation. What could possibly be next? She guided me to her bedroom, where another set of clothes awaited, skirts, soft blouses, even delicate shoes. My heart pounded. "I won't push you," she said. "You can stop anytime. But trust me, you'll see yourself in ways you never imagined." I hesitated, then reached for the skirt. The moment I stepped into it, the sensation was electric. My body felt lighter, my movements more fluid. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I had never allowed myself to be. Someone softer, more open, yet undeniably me. Sarah came closer, gently adjusting the collar of my blouse, smoothing a wrinkle in the fabric. "You're beautiful," she said quietly. I felt my cheeks heat up. Not just from embarrassment, but from something deeper: validation, acceptance, recognition. For the first time, someone saw this side of me and didn't recoil, didn't laugh, didn't judge. The night stretched on. We tried different outfits, different combinations. Every time I looked in the mirror, I felt a new layer of myself emerging. I laughed, cried, whispered my fears to her, and she listened. No judgment, no rush, just patience and understanding. By the end of the evening, I realized I had changed, not just in clothes, but in perception. My mind felt sharper, more aware, yet my heart felt lighter. I was seeing the world differently, and more importantly, seeing myself differently. Sarah smiled at me, that calm, knowing look. "This is just the beginning. But you're ready to see how far it can go." As I left her apartment that night, I felt a strange thrill mixed with fear. The city lights reflected on the pavement, and I noticed my reflection in a shop window. I barely recognized myself, but I liked it. I wanted to explore it more, to see where it could lead. The next day, I wore leggings again. Not the same ones, but a new pair I had bought secretly, trembling as I pulled them on. Walking into work, I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also alive. I kept my hoodie zipped, tried to blend in, but every step reminded me of the sensation. The awareness, the fluidity, the thrill of being someone new and yet completely myself. By evening, I couldn't resist. I called Sarah. She didn't ask what I was wearing. She just said, "Come over. Let's continue." And I knew, deep down, that this was more than curiosity now. It was a journey, a transformation that was rewriting who I thought I was. By the third week, the change had started to seep into every corner of my life, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. I would wake up in the morning, and the thought of leggings or soft, flowing tops didn't feel foreign anymore, it felt natural. At work, I was careful, hiding my little wardrobe experiments beneath oversized hoodies or jackets, but my mind was constantly elsewhere. I kept replaying the moments with Sarah, the way she had guided me through each outfit, each step, each subtle shift in posture. Every evening at her apartment felt like stepping into another world, a world where I could be both myself and someone new at the same time. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of shame, of fear that someone might see me differently, or worse, laugh at me. I kept my secret close. My family had no idea. My colleagues had no idea. It was just Sarah and me, and yet it felt like the most important thing in my life. Sometimes, on the subway or in a crowded street, I would catch a reflection of my legs in the leggings and my stomach would twist with a mix of panic and exhilaration. I didn't know if I wanted to run or revel in it. Sarah was patient. Always patient. She introduced small changes each time I visited. One day it was a more fitted top, the next a soft scarf, the next subtle makeup to accentuate features I hadn't noticed in myself. Each step was deliberate, careful, and yet transformative. The changes weren't just on the surface, they were inside me. I started walking differently, talking differently, noticing myself in ways I had suppressed for years. One evening, she handed me a mirror and said, "Look at yourself, not just the clothes, not just your body, but really see you. Not the mask you show the world, but the person beneath." I felt a lump in my throat. Seeing myself that way was terrifying. I saw vulnerability, softness, strength, curiosity, all bundled together in a reflection that was still undeniably me, yet so different from the version of myself I had known. We spent hours experimenting with outfits and hairstyles. She guided my hands as I adjusted a collar, smoothed a sleeve, brushed my hair differently. Each touch, each gesture, felt intimate, not in a romantic way, but in a deeply human way. I was learning to care for myself, to notice myself, to accept parts of me I had buried. The real challenge came one weekend when Sarah suggested we go out, to a quiet cafe, just across town. She said, "It's time to see how it feels outside the apartment." Not everyone needs to know, but you should see yourself in the world. My heart raced. The idea of walking down a street wearing leggings, a soft blouse, and a scarf, feeling seen in ways I hadn't allowed before, it was terrifying. But I trusted her, and somehow, I knew I needed to try. We walked together, side by side. I felt exposed, every glance from a passerby making my chest tighten, every reflection in a window making my stomach flip. But Sarah walked calmly, confidently, and it anchored me. By the time we reached the cafe, I felt lighter. Strange, but lighter. I was aware of my body in a way that was freeing, not constraining. People didn't stare in judgment, they barely noticed. And in that realization, I felt a surge of courage I hadn't known I possessed. We ordered our drinks and sat by the window. I kept catching glimpses of myself, and each time I did, I smiled, not nervously, not awkwardly, but genuinely. Sarah noticed. "See," she said quietly. "You're finding your balance. One step at a time." Over the next few weeks, I began making small changes in my own space. I bought a few pieces of clothing on my own, experimented with subtle touches of color, tried hairstyles I had dismissed before. At first, it was terrifying, each choice a battle between fear and curiosity. But gradually, it became exhilarating. I was discovering myself in real time, learning that the boundaries I had built around my identity weren't as rigid as I thought. Then came the night that truly changed me. Sarah suggested we try something more dramatic, a complete outfit transformation, with hair, makeup, and accessories included. I froze. Part of me screamed that it was too far, that I wasn't ready. But another part, the part that had been waking up these past weeks, urged me forward. I nodded, hands trembling. She guided me patiently. Every movement was deliberate. The application of soft foundation, the careful brushing of hair, the placement of accessories. Each change made me feel more myself, but also more vulnerable. When I stood before the mirror after the transformation, I almost didn't recognize the person looking back. My reflection radiated a confidence, a softness, a curiosity I had never allowed myself to show the world. I laughed, a shaky, incredulous laugh. "Is this really me?" I whispered. Sarah smiled. "Yes," she said. "It's been you all along. You just needed permission to see it." I left her apartment that night feeling different, lighter, stronger, more aware. I knew that my journey wasn't over. The transformation wasn't just about clothing or appearance. It was about courage, acceptance, and discovery. I had stepped into a version of myself I hadn't allowed to exist, and it felt electric. That week, at work, at home, everywhere I went, I felt the echoes of that transformation. I moved differently, walked differently, even thought differently. The leggings, the tops, the scarves, they had been the doorway, but the real change was inside me. I realized I had discovered a part of myself that had always been there, waiting for the courage to emerge. The days that followed felt surreal. I was no longer just the same person who had nervously stepped into Sarah's apartment weeks ago. Every step I took, every glance I caught of myself in a window reflection or a mirror reminded me that I was different now. Not in a way that could be hidden, but in a way that was undeniable. It wasn't about the leggings anymore. It wasn't about the tops, scarves, or shoes. It was about me, fully, finally, seeing and accepting myself. I began experimenting outside of Sarah's guidance too. On weekends, I would dress carefully, softly, with intention. It felt thrilling and terrifying at the same time, like stepping onto a stage where the audience was my own reflection. I would stand in front of the mirror, turning, adjusting, smiling, and sometimes crying quietly. There were moments of panic, yes, but also moments of pride I had never experienced. My body, my posture, my very presence felt alive in ways I had never imagined. One evening, Sarah suggested we go out for dinner, just the two of us, somewhere familiar but public. I hesitated. The thought of being seen like this by strangers was frightening. But she took my hand, steady and warm, and said simply, "You've come so far. Trust yourself." That was all I needed. Walking down the street, I felt every eye on me, or maybe I just imagined it, but something had shifted inside. I no longer wanted to hide. I didn't want to shrink back into the familiar shell of who I had been. I wanted to move freely, to exist fully, to inhabit this new space of identity I had been discovering. Every step was a declaration, a whisper of courage I hadn't known I could feel. At the restaurant, the waitstaff barely noticed me, and strangers didn't stare. And yet, I felt seen in the most profound way, seen by myself. For the first time, I understood what Sarah had been trying to show me. The transformation wasn't just skin deep. It was mental, emotional, spiritual even. It was about claiming the parts of yourself you had hidden for fear, for comfort, for conformity. After dinner, we walked through a quiet park. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, and I caught a glimpse of myself in a puddle. My reflection was no longer the hesitant, uncertain person from weeks ago. My eyes were steady, my posture confident, my expression soft but unmistakably alive. I stopped and stared, feeling a swell of emotion I could barely name. Pride, relief, joy, freedom, all mixed into one sharp, intoxicating moment. Sarah stood beside me, watching quietly. "This is you," she said. "Not someone new. Not a mask. Just you, finally free to exist." I swallowed hard, tears pricking my eyes. I wanted to thank her, to hug her, to explain, but words failed me. She just smiled, gently, patiently, like she always did. The following weeks became a rhythm. I balanced my work life, my personal life, and my growing confidence in my new identity. I experimented with clothes, styles, even my mannerisms. The leggings that had started it all became a symbol, a secret talisman of transformation. I realized that change isn't about perfection. It's about courage, about honesty, about daring to look inward and accept every piece of yourself. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset. The sky was a riot of oranges and purples, reflecting the mixture of fear and exhilaration I had felt through this journey. I remembered the first day, the trembling, the uncertainty, the whispered hesitations. And now, here I was, alive, aware, transformed, yet still undeniably me. I felt a kind of peace I had never known, a certainty that this journey was only the beginning, but that I had discovered something permanent inside myself. Sarah's role in my life remained a quiet but profound anchor. She had guided me, supported me, and given me permission to see myself. But ultimately, the transformation had been mine. Every step, every choice, every small act of bravery had belonged to me. I realized I had found the courage to exist fully, honestly, and unapologetically. That night, I looked in the mirror one last time before bed. I traced my reflection with my fingertips, smiling softly. "You've changed," I whispered to myself. Not just in clothes or appearance, but in confidence, self-awareness, and acceptance. The leggings, the outfits, the careful guidance, they had been the catalyst. But the real change, the real transformation, had been within me all along. And as I drifted to sleep, I felt a deep, quiet certainty. I was no longer hiding. I was no longer afraid. I had stepped into the full spectrum of who I was, and that, more than anything else, was beautiful.